Hey, I'm And.
And I'm Beck.
And we are the Gold Diggers, because we believe there's gold found in everyone.
Everyone is unique, interesting and exciting with a great story to share.
And we aim to find it.
The question is, can we rise to the challenge and strike gold? Stay tuned to find out as we chat to today's mystery guest.
I need you're my sugar.
So this is how it normally works. Normally we send someone out of the room. But this morning, Angela and I are interviewing a very special guest, Paul Mergard, the CEO of Destiny Rescue. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thank you for having us. It's really good to be here.
Welcome. It's good for you to be here with us today.
Yeah.
So Ange and I recently went and saw the movie Sound of Freedom. And it's such an impacting movie that we immediately found you and said, please come on our show.
You have to come on the podcast.
That's right. So 2 days later, here you are.
That's it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
It's great to be here. No, it's good.
Yeah.
And we're not sending someone out of the room because really we want to focus on the power and impact of the movie Sound of Freedom. And so for those of you that have been following our podcast, you may remember episode 61, we had Nera Lee on the podcast, and she works for Destiny Rescue, and she shared some amazing stories of going into Cambodia, into Thailand, and just what some of your teams do in rescuing children from child exploitation, sexual exploitation. So we want to delve into that a little bit, but before we do, part of today is really about encouraging everybody to go out and watch this movie, Sound of Freedom. Do you want to just explain a little bit of what this movie's about?
Yeah, it's a movie about Tim Ballard, who was a US Homeland Security officer. He was working in trying to arrest pedophiles and children that have been trafficked, and they identified this young boy and girl that had been sold and really went through an operation to try and rescue these children. What I think the movie does, it highlights the issue of child sexual exploitation and human trafficking. It's the fastest growing criminal activity in the world today. There's over 1 million children sold into the sex trade every year, and it generates over $150 billion a year, US dollars.
Those statistics were astounding when I heard them. I knew it was a massive scale, but when I heard them, and then they said that the scale of trafficking these days is so much higher than it was when slavery was legal.
It is, yeah, it is. And look, I think today, there's a lot of things that conspire against children. You've got easy access to the internet. And so what we tend to find in a lot of the countries that we work in, you'll have a trafficker walks through a community, and they'll be, it'll be an impoverished community, and they might hand a phone to an adult and go, hey, here's a brand new iPhone. For every video you upload of your child or your nephew or your niece or your next door neighbour or whatever it is, we'll pay you money. And that goes on to the, into the online space where people can view that material. You've got people that are trying to break the bonds of poverty and get tricked or get groomed into doing things that they never would have thought. But, poverty drives people to survival, I suppose. And we find a lot of kids that we rescue have been driven into that sort of work just because of the fact that they're desperate and they've got to put food on the table. And then I think the other thing you find, and this is probably the really sad thing about human trafficking, is that you can sell a person many, many times a day. Whereas if you're in the arms trade or the drugs trade, you can basically sell a bullet or a bomb once. You can use drugs once. But you can't keep using them. And so once you start exploiting people, it's very profitable for traffickers to make a lot of money off of it. And, I guess the world just needs to be woken up to what actually happens.
It just seems like a massive thing to try and affect, to turn around for good and obliterate, basically. It just seems on such a great big scale. But there are heroes who are out there doing exactly that, aren't there?
Yeah, and look, there's a growing groundswell. I think about, I've been involved in this kind of work for a bit over, must be 23, 24 years now, and I think I've seen the community become a lot more aware of of this issue, but it's still fairly undiscovered. You know, I'm still surprised at how many people just will say to us, we never knew that this was even an issue. And
I think that's why I like the movie so much. It's not only is it Hollywood produced, it's a very well produced production. But it just hones in on one family, which I think is something you can relate to. It's one family, and this father just innocently takes his children to a modelling audition. They go into a room with other kids. There's cameras there. It all looks completely legit. Yeah. Closes the door, tells him to come back in a couple of hours. When he returns, the kids are gone. Yeah. And then we follow the story of Tim Ballard, as you've already mentioned, and he was a Homeland Security agent, used to rescue kids from the trafficking industry. In fact, no, he used to convict the paedophiles,
Correct.
didn't he?
Yeah.
And then eventually thought, no, I want to go into rescuing the children, which is what he did. And the story really is about him trying to find these kids that have been taken from their father. And it makes it so personable. And I think that's what I love the most about it, because it makes us aware as parents just how easy and innocently this can happen. And it can happen to any one of us. And the stats are so huge that it's the likelihood of it hitting someone we know or someone within our sphere of influence is probably very real.
Yeah, and I think, Angela, a lot of people here in Australia, they don't realise how vulnerable your children can be, particularly in the online space. It's, most trafficking isn't the snatching kids off the side of the street. It's someone close to you. It's someone that is known to you. It's someone that, could be a family or a friend that tends to exploit, or someone that you build a friendship and a relationship with. We would find a lot of the kids we rescue in a lot of countries will be groomed online through Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat. You've got someone that builds a relationship and befriends someone. You might have someone, it's catfishing, or it's, someone sitting on the other side of a computer screen, and over a period of weeks and months, the person feels safe. And I think last year we rescued over 900 people on the Nepal border, most of whom were being trafficked into a neighbouring country because they thought they were getting offered a better life. They thought they'd fallen in love with someone. They thought that, there was a promise of a job, there was a promise of a future and a hope, and what they were about to walk into before our agents had stopped them was they were about to walk into a hell that they'd never even imagined. And so it's great that this movie is raising awareness, getting people talking about the issue, getting people to become more aware of what really happens. Because for us to affect significant change globally, we need people to be more aware of what happens.
That's right. Paul, are you able to tell us how you got into this line of work? A bit about your background?
Yeah. Look, back in the early 2000s, I was working for the Salvation Army at the time, and I became aware of the issue of human trafficking actually through the movie Amazing Grace, funnily enough, which talked about the Atlantic slave trade and how that ended with when William Wilberforce really fought to end that. And I guess I started to become more aware of that issue of trafficking. And then a couple of years in, I was doing a heap of campaigning around different issues around cocoa, slavery in the cocoa industry and whatnot. And then a mate and I just went, we need to go, and we just felt like we needed to understand the issue more. And so we travelled to India, and I went and spent a week on holidays in Mumbai's red light district. And we were, working with a couple of different NGOs, seeing what they were doing, understanding what their programs were. And we got to go in and really experience some of their frontline work in Mumbai's red light district. And there was a particular lady that I met called Anita. And Anita, her story was when she was 9 years old, she was working in a garment factory in Nepal. Again, 9-year-old girl, working, wasn't at school. Just because of poverty and the situation that she was in, she was being forced to work, 50, 60 hours a week. And one day a lady came into that garment factory and said to Anita, if you come with me, and said to Anita's friend, if both of you come with me, I'll get you a better job where you can earn more money and you can send more money back to your family. And so these two 9-year-old girls thought, okay, this sounds good. So they went with this lady. And then over the next couple of days, they were trafficked across the Nepal border and they ended up in Mumbai's red light district.
Wow.
Now, I met Anita when about 15 years after she had been trafficked. And she had now come out of the sex trade and she was actually helping other women come out of that work and find hope and build resilience. And there was something about Anita. I've never met another person in my life that is more resilient and that is more redeemed. And as I got to know Anita, and I've met her on a number of different trips that I've had to India, and I've got to meet her kids, and I've got to see this woman that really embodies redemption and really embodies freedom. And I was so incredibly inspired by Anita. And it was, I don't know, I had a moment when I was sitting there talking to her one day and I'm like, I need to make my life count for someone like you.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I think, I probably think about Anita most days. I want to honour her legacy and what she went through, and because there are millions of children that have been in the same situation that she's in, and just because she had no other option, she had no other choice, she was forced to do something. Her whole sense of agency, her whole sense of choice and freedom was robbed from her. But then it's incredible when you see that redemption and you see what happens to people once they get a taste of freedom and they finally get that ability to make their own choices.
It's incredible that they can come out of that and
yeah.
have a brand new life again. And
Yeah.
I've seen some videos and pamphlets from Destiny Rescue, and the kids who have been rescued, they actually look happy, and that gives you so much hope, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Knowing that they can come out and they can have a normal life again.
Because it almost seems such an impossible task. But if you focus on the ones and the twos, because I can connect with that moment that you talk about, in my history, I've started a charity in the UK that help rescue girls off the streets. They're there for a completely different reason, but I had that one moment, the first time I met my first ever street girl. Her name was Andrea, and she shocked me by saying that just 2 days before she'd given birth to a little baby girl and she was back out on the streets. And I'm like, how can I not do something about this? And and that then led me to start a charity of my own that helped to release people off the streets. And they had drug issues and all sorts of things. But it does take just one person, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
And that's what I loved about the movie, because it really did focus on one family. And essentially that was the same for Tim Ballard, who is probably who Jim Caviezel represents in the movie. It was just that one girl that he really wanted to rescue, but then it
became
into
personal, didn't it? Because you attached to that child that they drew you to, and you got to know about the child in the movie and her little brother, and then all of a sudden you're angry because something's happened to them.
Yeah.
And I think most of us can, we can relate to that sense. Like, we've all got kids or nieces or nephews, or we all know kids, and you're like, if that was my kid, what would I do? I think what inspires me the most in the movie actually is the resilience of the kids that are represented in that movie. I think they're the real hero of the movie, because they are brilliant actors.
I said the same. Amazing.
The way they portray the vulnerability of a child, but then also the resilience of a child, that desire to be free, that desire to love and care, that desire to overcome. Humans are really resilient, and often what's lacking, I think, for a lot of people is just that opportunity to break through the barriers that are put over you. And and I suppose that's what we see with the 13,000 people we've rescued from trafficking over the last 22 years, is you just see 13,000 stories of resilience and people that have been overcome the most incredible obstacles put in their way, and that is so incredibly inspiring.
Yeah,
so
13,000. That's an incredible figure, particularly when you think of just the one family, and then you've duplicated that 13,000 times. Because there's a really powerful moment, I think, in the movie where the father that's lost his kids goes to Tim Ballard and says, imagine going into the bedroom and your child is not there. They're not in their bed. Right. And that really was the thing for Tim's wife to say, give up your job and go and rescue the kids, because you're imagining walking into your child's bedroom and your child is not there.
Actually, I love his wife's attitude towards it. And she says to him, I feel like that little girl's my little girl.
Yeah.
And she kept sending him out, go find her.
Yeah.
That kind of support is really important.
And I think that makes it very relatable to each one of us. You know, if we want to get passionate about this cause, is imagine if it was your child. You know.
Yeah.
So after India, you came back. What led you into the next steps?
Yeah, I think, you know, I went and studied international development. So I had an accounting background initially out of school, but then went and, you know, did some international development study. And it's just been one of those driving forces, I think, in my life to go, well, I want it to count for something. And I guess I've spent a lot of time in the developing world. I've spent a lot of time in Africa and in South Asia, Southeast Asia. When you see, I guess, what we have in Australia, and then you look at what exists in other parts of the world, and you actually start realising that it's not that difficult for us to make an incredible difference for children right around the world. And so I guess for me that's just been a driving force to really do what I can to, you know, be on the front line, I guess, as much as I can to make a difference for kids. It's not an easy thing to shake, I suppose. So.
Yeah. So then you came across Destiny Rescue.
Yeah. I joined Destiny Rescue in 2019. So we'd been on the Sunshine Coast for a couple of years, and this, you know, Destiny Rescue was founded here on the Sunshine Coast. I'd worked in different not-for-profit organisations all around, you know, international children issues, and Destiny Rescue came and, you know, asked if I'd come on board. Initially came on board as their head of partnerships, and then after 18 months took over as CEO back in early 2021.
Yeah, great.
So the other thing the film shows is these kind of really heroic moments where, you know, Tim's off in the Colombian jungle rescuing kids. How real is that for some of your agents, that story?
Look, there is creative license being used in that, and you know, even Tim's come out and done interviews going, you know, the bit at the end where he's in the jungle by himself, that wasn't true. That's not real life. And, you know, like, it's a Hollywood film, so the movie, there's elements of the movie that's probably been magnified to make it, you know, translate better in the movies. But a lot of our agents will go in undercover into the bars, into the establishments, into massage parlours and whatnot to gather evidence. And I've done, you know, a reasonable amount of that now over my time with Destiny Rescue as well. When I'm travelling overseas, you will go in undercover, pretending to be customers, gathering evidence so that we can hand that evidence across to police. So then we can work with law enforcement to help execute, you know, raids and get children out to freedom, and then also the traffickers arrested.
What were those moments like for you when you went into those places, like the bars?
Yeah, they're look, it's hard to explain in so many ways. In one sense, a lot of the places that we go into are the places that Aussies go into when they're travelling overseas. You know, so you've got a bunch of guys going away on an end of year footy trip, and you know, they'll go to some of the bars in those areas, and you're sitting in bars full of Aussies or full of Westerners. And what's really challenging in those situations is that you might have a 14 or 15-year-old that's sitting next to you in those bars. And so our job is to gather as much evidence as we can, and we've got different ways of doing that. You know, there are moments in that where you're like, I just want to get you out of here, because I know that what is going to come later on that night when the next customer comes in is really uncomfortable. But I guess you've got to understand the role that you play and the purpose of you being there, because, you know, as much sometimes you just want to grab them and run, like, you've got to understand the bigger purpose, and that if you actually want to get the place shut down and if you want to get the trafficker arrested, there's a process, I guess, that you've got to follow to make sure you get people arrested. So
once you've gathered the evidence, a sting is organised and they go in and gather as many children as possible? Yeah,
pretty much. It'll depend a little bit depending on the individual situation, but that's where we work with law enforcement to, you know, they're the ones that have to go and do the arresting. They're the ones that have to go and execute those cases, and and whatnot. But it's working hand in hand with law enforcement to help them build those cases so we can get more kids to freedom, and then on a pathway to freedom as well. So
there was a moment again in the movie where Tim was struggling with the magnitude of what he was witnessing. He'd been doing a lot of research, looking obviously into it was on the paedophile side that he was looking into, and it was a heavy weight on him that then impacted on his family. Do you find that, how do you manage that?
Yeah, look, the movie kind of describes Tim watching a lot of videos and stuff. We don't do that. We've got technology that uses artificial intelligence that will scan videos and whatnot, where, technology's evolved a lot so that you don't have someone having to sit in front of a computer watching a whole heap of inappropriate stuff. So I think, though, with our agents, there is a real sense of resilience. I often liken it to, paramedics and, police and even, psychologists or whatnot. Like you can deal with tough stuff, but you've got briefing and debriefing. You've got opportunity to work through the things that you're coming across. And then I think for me, the way I deal with it generally is to focus on what happens after rescue. And that's where I think I keep so upbeat about what we do, because I don't know if it's always hard to explain it, but I guess I've tried to train my head not to dwell in the negative stuff, but to dwell in what happens after rescue. And that's, for me, is what keeps me fresh and what keeps me motivated to be able to do it.
That's awesome. So after rescue, what does the path to freedom look like?
Yeah, it will depend on country to country and depending on the situation of the child, but we will develop, in most cases, an individualised pathway to freedom for a child. So we sit down with a child, depending on their age, where they live, depending on what country they're in as well. Some of the countries that we operate in, the government will dictate what happens with aftercare. But then there's other places where we will, we work through trauma resilience training. We've got health checks that we'll take the kids through. We've got economic empowerment programs that we run through. So whether that be small business startups for either again, depending on the age of the child, because most of the kids we would rescue would generally be between 14 and 17 or 18. We do rescue younger than that and older than that, but that's predominantly who we're rescuing. So a lot of them have finished school. So we're looking for job creation opportunities. It might be getting them into a vocational skills course or something like that, and then having counsellors that work through with them and social workers that work through with them over a couple of years to ensure that they can bounce back and they don't go back into the trade. So,
are many reunited with their parents?
Yeah, that is our ultimate goal, is to reunite with family if it's safe to do so. And even our aftercare, we used to do a lot of residential aftercare. We've changed that model a lot over the last few years to try and get kids back into the family as soon as we can, because provided the family's safe to be back in, that's actually the best place for a child to be. It's, we know that through our foster care system, for instance, in Australia. Like, if you can get the family back in with kin, that's actually the best and safest place for the child most of the time. Now, where we can't do that, there are residential facilities that we will use if there's no other option for that particular child.
I remember when Nera Lee was on the podcast, she said that you have an 80% success rate, which I think is remarkable. And particularly in that industry, it's unheard of to have so many people that actually go on to find their freedom. So I think it's incredible that you're able to achieve those results. But it sounds as if there is a lot of resource required. There's a lot of infrastructure around that process to freedom. So where do you get the resource from?
Yeah, look, all of our funding for Destiny Rescue, we fundraise in Australia, the US and New Zealand at this point in time. All of our funding in Australia comes from mums and dads. We've got a couple of corporates, churches, individual people that want to support rescue and freedom of a child. On average, it costs us $1,800 to rescue a child and get them on that pathway to freedom. And but most people will support us through becoming rescue partners, and that's just people going, you know what, we're going to support you guys on a monthly basis of whatever amount you want, and that means that we can be relentless on rescue. And it's that in itself is pretty inspiring to see people finding a real sense of achievement and a real sense of they can actually make a difference. And we rescue on average 16 children every single day.
Wow.
And so people can really feel part of that. And it's the feedback we often get from our incredible supporters. They're going, we actually feel like we're making a difference. We feel like we're part of this. And I think, a lot of people can kind of go, oh, the problem's too big, I can't do anything. But you know what? If all of us did a little bit, we can all do a lot. And I think that's that corporate sense of coming together as a group of people to go, you know what, individually, even for myself, individually, I can't do a lot. But I can do a lot when we all join together and when we've got a whole community of people that go, you know what, we can make a stand on this. We can challenge community sentiment. We can challenge, when we've got mates going on end-of-year footy trips, or, you've got people travelling overseas and you think, oh, this will be a bit of fun to go and look at one of those shows and stuff, and you walk into some of those places that a lot of Aussies go to and you suddenly, they're not as wholesome as what you think they might be, and that there's a lot of exploitation that happens behind the scenes in a lot of those places. And so Australians can really start to change the way that we act when we travel, when we're online, and then how we protect our kids.
That's a really good point. I know at the beginning of the movie, I leaned over to Angela and I said, I could really punch that guy right now. It makes you angry. Yeah. Oh, gosh.
And that's a lot coming from you, because I couldn't imagine you punching anybody back.
I know. I'm just like, oh, this is making me angry straight away. But I've got to say, overall, I think that anger is important. I think it's important that the audience connects with the movie straight up, which it does very effectively. And you do feel angry, and you're watching, images of how easy these children are being taken. And then it takes you through this personal story of the two children. I think it's just been done so well. It's really connecting the audience to the situation. And I really hope that anyone who isn't aware of what's going on, I really hope this opens their eyes. Go and see the movie if you're listening to this, and take your friends with you. It's a really important movie to see.
Yeah, and I know that there's been sort of some political controversy over the movie. There's an announcement at the end of the movie that says it's taken 5 years, that it was actually recorded 5 years ago, and it's taken that long because there's been so many setbacks and hurdles and all sorts of things to overcome to actually get this movie to air. And I know for Destiny Rescue you've partnered with the movie, but it's not for any political reason. But there is a moment where Jim Caviezel, can't even say his name, Jim Caviezel, says in the movie, it's because God's children are not for sale. And that's it, simply. And if we have kids, we've got a heart for humanity, then this is a movie we need to see, because this is definitely an issue that is impacting our humanity significantly, and we can do something about it. So we can support Destiny Rescue and enable you guys to rescue more. I mean, 13,000 is incredible. How many was it a day that you said?
16 a day.
16
a day.
And
our vision is to try and rescue 100,000 by the end of the decade. So, we could, if we had the resources, we could rescue a lot more than what we're currently doing. Our program works. We've got so many, cases in the works. Most of our work is just limited purely by funding. And, over the last 3 years, we've doubled the amount of rescues because we've been able to double our funding. Yeah. And so we are, we run pretty tightly as an organisation. We try not to waste money on things that don't count. We're constantly focused on the why, constantly focused on the next child, because we know that there are parents at home looking at that empty bed going, where is my child? I want my child back. And, again, I often think, if it was my kids, what would I want an organisation like Destiny Rescue to do? I'd want someone to get out there and help find my kids and help navigate the dark alleyways of the world to identify where that, where my kid is. And I think it's a shame that the movie has been so politicised, because the movie is actually not a political thing. No. It tells a story of injustice. It tells a story of what happens to over 1 million children every single year. And
that's an incredible number, isn't it?
Yeah.
Families who are missing children.
And I think about, you think about in Australia or in the West, when we've had, kids like a Daniel McComb or Daniel Morecambe or Madeleine McCann go missing, and the outcry from the West. Well, we don't hear that outcry from developing world countries, because there's almost this sense in Australia and in the West sometimes that I guess maybe life's cheaper there. So, but I know that in a UN special reporter did a study in Thailand over a 10-year period, and Australians were the biggest perpetrators of sex crimes in Thailand. 31% of all arrests in Thailand over a 10-year period were Aussies. And so when people go, it's something that happens overseas, it doesn't affect us, it's actually a stain on our nation that we are the biggest perpetrators of sex crimes in a country like Thailand, and we need to change that.
That's terrible. That's a shame on Australia, isn't
well,
it?
I know, because I was going to ask the question, like, how does human trafficking, or child trafficking in particular, impact Australia? Do children get taken from this country as well?
Look, there certainly are children that are trafficked here in Australia. I think a lot of the trafficking in Australia tend to be kids in out-of-home care, or kids that have fallen through the cracks. It's kids that are couch surfing, kids that are, maybe having to swap sex for accommodation, or, particularly at the moment with the housing crisis in Australia, you've got kids that are homeless that, might be trying to just get a bed to sleep, and so it's, in that sort of sense. I think one of the differences, I guess, with Australia compared to, say, the US or other countries is that we've got a massive big moat around our country. So it does, what you see in the US, I suppose, with a lot of kids being trafficked across the border into the US, doesn't happen to the same extent in Australia. But Australians are a huge consumer of exploitation material. And, you don't actually need a border anymore for kids to be exploited online, because a lot of it happens online. It happens on the internet. And so that's become more and more accessible. And there's certainly patterns of behaviour that develop of people viewing stuff online and then travelling overseas for it as well. So.
And you are actually doing something to help that online space as well, aren't you?
Yeah, we've got about 12 months ago, a bit over 12 months ago, we started a new OSEC, Online Sexual Exploitation of Children program in Thailand. We've now trained over 350 Thai police to use a technology solution that we've got to help identify kids that are being exploited online. It's been incredibly successful in this first 12 months in the pilot that we've done, and now we're, just again trying to get funding to try and expand that to other countries. But we recently signed an MOU with the Royal Thai Police, their Cybercrimes Investigation Unit, and it's been really powerful to forge new relationships with police in Thailand to give them technology that they've never had, because they only get to investigate at the moment around about 1% of all tip-offs that they get on online crimes against children. So the technology that they've not had before is enabling them to really get in and execute some cases. We've had the first couple of raids from that technology over the last few months, and it's really good to see some of the inroads that we're getting with that.
That's amazing, because it's such an important space to be operating in. I remember when I started my charity, a number of in the UK, a number of people came to me and said, "Thank you for doing this, because you've enabled me to now be able to help. I've always had a heart to be able to help these, but I just didn't know how." Because there was no access. It's not all of us can go to Thailand and rescue kids, but we can enable those that do. And so I think that's our message for today, really, is A, go and watch the movie, and B, let's get involved. Let's be part of a group of people. Let's join together, and no matter how much our resources, it's no matter how small or large, let's just get on board and support Destiny Rescue, support you guys, because you're doing an incredible job and seeing some great results. And, the problem is huge, but even if you're helping 1, 2, 12 families a day, 16 families a day, whatever, it's something. And
Paul, we're really grateful for your time today. Thank you so much for coming in. You're doing an amazing job. And I think it's just very important to get the message out there, which you're doing, and the movie's doing as well. So keep up that good work.
Yeah, thanks so much. Really appreciate having us.
Sound of Freedom is now out in the cinemas. Well, it comes out Thursday, but by the time this podcast is live, it will already be out. So please make sure you get your ticket and you go and see the movie. So, Paul, how can people support Destiny Rescue?
Yeah, look, the easiest thing for people to do is go to our website, destinyrescue.org. On the website, you can do a whole heap of things. You can download some of our videos or documentaries to watch, so you'll see, I guess more of the real life thing rather than the Hollywood production. We've got some phenomenal docos. There's also other resources that you can read to get educated. And then I just invite people to, consider becoming a rescue partner. The more people we've got joining with us and linking arms with us, we've all got a role that we can play. And we are committed as an organisation to keeping you informed, letting you know how many kids you've helped rescue, giving you regular updates, hearing stories of transformation and feeling like you're part of it. And people can just choose however they want to do that. So we don't have set amounts that people can do. Some people have got capacity to do a lot. Some people have got capacity to do a little, but everything works in together. And so jump on our website, find out how to become a rescue partner. And we'd love to be able to join that journey with people and help them make a difference in the life of a child around the world.
That's great.
Honey, you're my sugar.
Wow.
Wasn't that an impacting interview?
Yeah. I'm just a bit gobsmacked, really, just how big this issue is. It's so huge. I know the movie made me quite emotional because it made it really real and relatable. Yeah. Even though it's happening in Thailand or wherever. But it's happening here. It's happening everywhere.
Yeah.
But it just makes it so relatable. And that moment where they talk about, imagine going into your child's bedroom and they're not there. The emotion of that, I could really feel it through the movie. And it's stuck, it's lingered.
I know. It's so impacting to the audience that you do take it with you, don't you? Which is exactly what it should do. Yeah. You want this kind of movie to stay with you and change the way you see the world. Also, it makes you protective of people that you see around you as well and children that you see around you. You don't want to turn a blind eye to children who might look lost or in a point of danger. It makes you want to actually, I always have anyway, but it makes you more aware of making sure those children are safe.
Yeah, and I think it's just double checking things, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it was so easy that the father had his children taken from him. That it probably make us question a little bit more some of the things that we put around our kids without being fearful of it, because you don't want to live in fear either, but just being aware.
Yes.
And I think having Paul on was so good because we might feel we want to get involved, but then how do you do that? Because not all of us are going to go off into the Colombian jungle and rescue kids, are we?
No.
But to enable those that can is actually something positive that we can physically do.
Yeah. And those people who have been called to do it and have been trained to do that, I admire them so much that they are the heroes going into those places to pull those children out under great risk to themselves.
Yeah. I love the fact that human trafficking or child trafficking is being profiled at the moment because it is something that is quite often hidden. There's other things, maybe, drugs and addictions and things like that take precedence, but really this is such a growing industry and is superseding all of those now. So to be profiling that, I think it's timely and I think it's really important that we do that.
And I love the message that stands out. God's children can't be sold.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think we all have to take hold of and protect each other. Yeah.
So that's it for today's podcast. You'll find us on all the major podcast platforms. The podcasts come out every Wednesday. We'd love to hear from you on our socials, the Gold Diggers Podcast. Tell us about your story so we can find the gold in you.
Easy as pie, lemon, apple or cherry. Loving you is so very sweet, sweet, sweet. How can it be such a piece of cake? And your smile is the icing. Loving you is a poem. Honey, you're my sugar.